They told me a mother's sacrifice never goes unnoticed. But after 25 years of giving my daughter everything, she looked me in the eye and said, "Maybe you should leave." My name is Linda Cooper, and for 57 years, my life has been a winding road of sacrifice, loss, small joys, and heavy burdens. But nothing in those years prepared me for the day when my own daughter would stand in front of me, eyes cold, and tell me that the house I had poured my soul into was no longer mine, that my years of giving, of scraping by, of choosing her over myself were simply not enough. It is strange, isn't it? How the people we raise, the ones we'd gladly walk through fire for, can one day look at us as if we are strangers, burdens to be managed, obstacles in their climb. But before that day, before Rachel's voice cut me like glass, there was a life. A long, hard, imperfect life that shaped me into the woman who stood in that kitchen and refused, for the first time in decades, to bend. I was 21 when I gave birth to Rachel. Young, unprepared, and alone. Her father Mark was a man of promises, but not of permanence. When he left, Rachel was barely 3 months old. I still remember the silence in the apartment the day I realized he wasn't coming back. I'd set 2 plates on the small kitchen table, out of habit, then laughed bitterly at myself. The next day, I sold those extra dishes for grocery money. Every choice after that was survival. I took night shifts at a diner, cradling Rachel in one arm while trying to balance bills with the other. I went without meals more times than I can count just so she could eat. And through it all, I told myself it was worth it, that one day she would understand what her mother had done to keep her safe, fed, and loved. Rachel was a bright child. Sharp eyes, sharper tongue, even as a little girl. She learned to read early, and I was so proud of her. Teachers praised her essays, her quick thinking. I wanted her to soar higher than I ever could. But alongside that brilliance, there was a streak of entitlement, a sense that she deserved more, always more. As a child, it came out in tantrums when I couldn't afford new shoes. As a teenager, it showed in her complaints about the car I drove, the clothes I bought from thrift stores. I told myself it was just youth, that she would grow out of it, that when she became a woman, she would look back and see the sacrifices for what they were. Love, not shortcomings. By the time Rachel turned 24, she was married to Derek, a man whose smile never quite reached his eyes. He was polite enough in the beginning, all yes ma'ams and thank you Linda, but I could sense something lurking beneath the surface. Ambition, maybe, or resentment, perhaps both. When Rachel and Derek started talking about buying a house, I wanted to help. It had been my dream to give Rachel something solid, a foundation she could build her family on. I didn't have much, just the savings I had scraped together for retirement. But when she called me one evening, voice trembling with excitement about a cream-colored colonial in Edmond, I felt that familiar tug on my heart. "Mom, it's perfect," she said breathlessly. 4 bedrooms, a big yard, close to good schools. But we can't swing the down payment, not without help. I knew what she was asking before she said it. And like every other time in her life, I didn't hesitate. "I'll help," I told her. "Whatever it takes." That night, I transferred nearly all of my savings to cover the down payment. 40 years of late nights, skipped vacations, and quiet dreams erased with a few keystrokes. But when Rachel hugged me at the closing, whispering, "I'll never forget this, Mom," I believed her. The house became their pride. Rachel filled it with new furniture, bright curtains, picture frames of smiling faces. I visited often, bringing groceries, sometimes slipping cash into their hands when bills piled too high. Every month I wrote a check for the mortgage, telling myself I was investing in Rachel's stability, her happiness. But with each passing year, gratitude faded. Rachel stopped saying thank you. Derek started treating my contributions as expected, not generous. And slowly, the warmth in that house began to chill. The first sign came one Thanksgiving. I'd brought pies, like always, and set them on the counter. Derek looked at them, then at Rachel, and muttered, "Store? Bought again?" The way Rachel laughed and agreed, as if I wasn't standing right there, cut deeper than I let on. Later, when I tried to talk to Rachel about how much I was still paying, how it was straining me, she brushed me off. "Mom, you're making a big deal out of nothing. You don't have that many expenses anyway. You should be glad you have us to spend it on. That night, lying awake in my small rented apartment, I felt the first crack of doubt. Was I helping or being used? Still, I pressed on. Mothers do. We justify, we forgive, we hope. But beneath that hope, resentment began to grow, not just theirs, but mine too. And then came the morning that shattered everything. It was a Saturday in March, the kind of morning when the air feels heavy with change, though the sky is deceptively clear. I had just finished my coffee when the phone rang. Rachel's name lit up the screen, and my stomach clenched. "Hi, honey," I answered, forcing brightness into my voice. Her reply was clipped. "Mom, we need to talk. Can you come over?" There was no warmth, no explanation. Just an order. And like always, I obeyed. The drive to Edmond felt longer than usual. The road stretched on, the houses blurring together as my mind spun. Maybe they wanted to tell me good news. Maybe Derek had finally landed that promotion he'd been chasing. Maybe, I thought desperately, they were planning a surprise. But when I pulled into the driveway, Derek was already on the porch, arms crossed, expression tight. He didn't say hello, just opened the door and gestured me inside. Rachel was waiting in the living room. She didn't hug me, didn't smile. Instead, she gestured to the couch like a lawyer preparing to deliver bad news. "Mom," she began, her tone rehearsed. "We've been talking, and we think it's time you transfer the deed to us." I blinked, unsure I'd heard right. "The deed? Rachel, I'm the one making the payments. I used my savings for the down payment." "Why?" Her eyes hardened. "Because it's our house. We live here. You don't. And honestly, it feels like you're holding it over us. Every time you write a check, it's like you're reminding us we couldn't do this without you. It's exhausting." I felt the room tilt. "Rachel, I only wanted to help. This was for you. For your family." Derek leaned forward, his voice low but sharp. "Then prove it, transfer the deed, stop the payments, let us stand on our own." My heart pounded. I looked at my daughter, the baby I had rocked through feverish nights. The girl whose scraped knees I'd kissed, whose college tuition I'd scraped to cover and saw only steel. "I can't do that," I whispered. Rachel's lips curled. Not in sadness, but in disdain. "Then maybe you should leave." The silence that followed was heavier than any words. And in that moment, something inside me broke. The drive back home after that confrontation felt like a dream, or maybe more like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. My hands clutched the steering wheel so tightly the skin around my knuckles turned white. My mind replayed Rachel's words on a cruel loop. "Transfer the deed. Stop the payments. Maybe you should leave." It wasn't just rejection. It was erasure. How do you explain the depth of sacrifice when the person you sacrificed for refuses to see it? How do you hold on to dignity when your own child looks at you and sees only a burden? I had spent years pouring everything I had into that house. It wasn't just brick and wood and a mortgage statement. It was my gift, my legacy. I had imagined it would be the place where my grandchildren grew, where birthdays were celebrated, where I could sit on the porch and know that my struggles had built something lasting. But now, that house stood like a monument to a painful truth. I had given too much, and in giving, I had erased myself. I thought back to the day we first walked through it. The realtor had opened the door with a dramatic flourish, and Rachel gasped, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's perfect," she whispered, running her fingers over the banister as if it were gold. Derek, ever the pragmatist, had pointed out the scuffed floors, the outdated fixtures. But even he couldn't hide the hunger in his voice when he said, "It's got potential." I had stood in the doorway, watching them, and felt something swell in my chest. This was why I had worked double shifts, why I had put off buying myself new clothes, why I had never taken that trip to the beach I'd always dreamed of. For this moment, for their joy. I signed the papers with trembling hands, drained my retirement savings without a second thought, and told myself it didn't matter. I'd figure out my future later. What mattered was Rachel's present. The first few months were blissful. Rachel invited me over constantly, eager to show me the improvements she was making. She planted flowers by the front walk, painted the kitchen a cheerful yellow, Derek installed new light fixtures, replaced the old carpets. They were proud. And I was proud for them. Every month, I sent the mortgage payment, smiling as I sealed the envelope. I told myself it was worth it. Worth every penny. Worth every late-night worry about my dwindling bank account. But slowly, the tone shifted. When Rachel talked about the house, she started saying, "Our investment, not your help." When Derek mentioned upgrades, he spoke as though the money had appeared from nowhere, rather than from my hard-earned savings. One evening, I overheard Rachel telling a friend on the phone, "Yeah, we bought the house last year. It was tough, but we managed." We managed. I remember sitting there, heart pounding, wondering if she even realized the lie. Did she believe it? Did she convince herself that her name on the deed meant she had paid the price? Or was it easier for her to erase me, to forget the truth of how much I had given? That erasure grew, piece by piece. The pies I brought became too sweet. The clothes I gifted my grandchildren were not their style. My advice, once sought eagerly, was now brushed aside with sighs and rolled eyes. The house had become more than just shelter for Rachel and Derek. It was the stage on which they rehearsed independence, the symbol of their adulthood. And in their script, I had no place. But what hurt most wasn't Derek's coldness or even Rachel's dismissiveness. It was the realization that in trying to give her everything, I had taught her nothing about gratitude. I had built a house of dreams, but its foundation was sand. And now, the tide was coming in. After that March morning, I began to see the cracks I had ignored for years. They weren't new, just clearer now, lit by the harsh truth I could no longer deny. Rachel had always been headstrong, but now her stubbornness had hardened into entitlement. Derek's polite veneer had long since crumbled, revealing a man who saw me less as family and more as an obstacle. The signs had been there, hadn't they? I remembered Christmas 2 years earlier. I had saved for months to buy Rachel a necklace, something simple but elegant, silver with a small sapphire pendant. She opened the box, glanced at it, and forced a smile. "Thanks, Mom," she said flatly, before moving on to Derek's gift, a designer handbag. Her eyes lit up at that one, genuine joy flooding her face. The necklace was left forgotten on the coffee table. Later that night, I found it shoved under a pile of wrapping paper. The chain tangled. I quietly picked it up, untangled it, and slipped it back into its box. She never wore it, or the time Derek made a snide comment about my car. It was old, yes, but reliable. "Maybe if you spent less money on other things, you could upgrade," he had joked. I had laughed along, but the sting lingered. He knew, though he never said it outright, that other things meant them. The mortgage payments, the bills I covered, the endless stream of financial lifelines I provided. And then there were the grandchildren. Sweet, innocent faces that lit up when I visited, little arms that wrapped around my neck. They loved me, and I loved them with a fierceness that surprised even me. But even that bond was weaponized. "If you don't want to help with the payments anymore, fine," Rachel snapped one day. "But don't expect to see the kids as much. We need stability, not guilt trips." I had stared at her, speechless. Guilt trips? Was that what she thought my sacrifices were? A strategy to control her, rather than acts of love? The cracks widened into chasms. Every visit to the house felt heavier, like stepping into enemy territory. Derek's forced smiles, Rachel's clipped words, the undercurrent of resentment that buzzed just beneath the surface. I began to dread the phone calls, the invitations, the subtle demands masked as requests. And yet, I kept paying. Out of habit, out of fear, out of love that refused to die even when it was bruised and beaten. But something inside me was shifting. For the first time in decades, I began to ask myself a dangerous question. What about me? What about the years I had left, the dreams I had buried, the security I had traded away? What about the woman behind the mother, the human being behind the sacrifice? I thought of the necklace in its forgotten box. The pies mocked for being store-bought. The countless checks written without thanks. I thought of Rachel's eyes, cold and hard as she demanded the deed. And I knew, with a clarity that chilled me, that the foundation was crumbling. The house wasn't just theirs, it was taking me down with it. The next chapter of my life was coming, whether I was ready or not. The morning of the confrontation started deceptively calm. The sky was pale blue, streaked with the first blush of spring. Birds darted between budding branches, their songs sharp and bright. I brewed my coffee as I always did, poured it into the chipped mug Ethan had painted for me in kindergarten, and sat at the kitchen table. For a brief, fragile moment, I let myself imagine it was just another day. But the letter on the counter shattered that illusion. It was the latest mortgage bill. The numbers glared up at me, cold and merciless. My hands trembled as I traced the balance due. A sum that felt heavier than any weight I had ever carried. I couldn't keep doing this. My savings were nearly gone. Retirement was no longer a cushion but a threadbare blanket full of holes. Every payment was another piece of my future slipping away. Another confirmation that I had built my life around people who saw me not as family, but as a resource to be tapped until dry. Rachel's voice from weeks earlier echoed in my mind. Maybe you should leave. I pressed the mug to my lips, but the coffee had turned bitter. Or maybe it was me who had changed my taste, my tolerance, my patience. By noon, I had made my decision. I pulled on my cardigan, slipped the letter into my purse, and drove to the house. My heart pounded with every mile. I rehearsed the words in my head. Calm, measured, reasonable. I told myself I wouldn't cry. I told myself I wouldn't shout. I told myself I would finally, at last, draw a line. The house loomed into view, bright and cheerful against the budding green of the neighborhood. It still looked beautiful to me, even now, even after everything. I parked at the curb, gripping the steering wheel for a long moment before forcing myself out of the car. Rachel opened the door before I could knock. "Mom," she said flatly. "We weren't expecting you." Derek appeared behind her, his arm draped possessively across her shoulders. His eyes narrowed when he saw the envelope in my hand. "We need to talk," I said. My voice was steady, though my stomach churned. Rachel sicked, already impatient. "Fine. Come in." The living room was as spotless as ever. Toys neatly tucked away. Throw pillows arranged just so. The children's laughter drifted faintly from upstairs, a bittersweet reminder of why I had endured so much for so long. I sat on the edge of the couch, clutching the envelope. Rachel crossed her arms. Derek leaned against the wall, smirking like a cat who had cornered its prey. "I can't keep paying the mortgage," I said finally. The words hung in the air like smoke. "My savings are gone. I've done everything I can, but I can't do it anymore." Rachel blinked, then tilted her head, her face unreadable. "So, what does that mean?" "It means," I said slowly, deliberately, "that the payments are your responsibility now. I've carried this burden for years. It's time for you and Derek to step up." For a heartbeat, silence. Then Derek laughed. "Step up?" he sneered. "This is our house. You agreed to help. What? Now you're just going to back out and leave us hanging?" My chest tightened. "I didn't agree to bleed myself dry," I shot back. "I gave you everything I had." "No one forced you," Derek interrupted, his tone sharp as a blade. Rachel's eyes flickered between us. For a moment, I thought she might defend me. Instead, she crossed her arms tighter. "Mom," she said coldly, "we need you to keep paying. You can't just decide to stop." I felt something inside me crack. "Can't?" I whispered. "Rachel, I've been doing this for years. Do you even realize what I've sacrificed? My retirement, my security, my peace of mind? You're being dramatic." Rachel snapped. "Dramatic?" My voice rose despite myself. "Rachel, I bought this house for you. I signed the papers. I drained my savings. I've carried every payment, every bill. And now you stand here and tell me I'm being dramatic?" Her jaw tightened. Derek smirked. "You're making this harder than it has to be," he said smoothly. "If the payments are such a problem, just transfer the deed. Put it in our name. We'll handle it from there." My blood ran cold. "Transfer the deed?" "Of course," Derek said, as if it were obvious. "The house should be ours. It's our family, our kids, our future. Why should you even be on the paperwork?" Rachel nodded, her silence an agreement louder than words. I stared at them, disbelief crashing over me like a wave. "You want me to hand over the house? After everything I've done?" "Mom, Rachel said, her voice sharp with frustration. You don't even live here. You don't need it. You said yourself you're tired. Why not just let it go? Let it go? My voice broke. Rachel, this house is the last thing I have. I gave it to you because I wanted you to have stability, but it's still mine. It's all I've got left. Her eyes hardened. Then maybe you shouldn't have given so much. The words hit like a slap. I sat frozen, staring at the daughter I had raised, the daughter I had loved more than my own life, and realized she saw me not as a mother, not as a person, but as an obstacle to her convenience. Derek stepped closer, lowering his voice. Sign the deed, Linda. Do the right thing, or you'll regret it. Something inside me snapped. For years, I had bent, sacrificed, endured. For years, I had been the foundation beneath their lives. But now, they were asking me to erase myself completely, to vanish so they could stand taller on the ruins of my sacrifice. I stood, my hands shaking but my voice firm. No, I said. Rachel's eyes widened. Derek's smirk faltered. No, Rachel repeated. No, I said again, louder this time. I won't transfer the deed. I won't keep paying. I won't let you strip me of everything I've worked for. I love you, Rachel, but I will not let you destroy me. Her face twisted, rage and disbelief mingling. You're choosing yourself over us? For once in my life, I whispered, yes. The silence that followed was deafening. Upstairs, the children laughed again, oblivious to the storm downstairs. I picked up my purse, slipped the envelope back inside, and walked toward the door. Rachel didn't move to stop me. Derek muttered something under his breath, but I didn't hear it. My ears were filled with the sound of my own heartbeat, pounding like war drums. When I stepped outside, the spring air felt different, sharper, freer, tinged with sorrow but also with something else. Resolve. For the first time in decades, I had chosen myself. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one truth was clear. I would never again let them hold my life hostage. The confrontation had ended not with compromise, but with a breaking. The cracks in the foundation had split wide open, and there was no going back. The house stood behind me, silent and gleaming, but it no longer felt like a dream. It was a cage, and I had finally found the strength to walk away.